as Preston Blackwood raised his voice loud enough for half the Stebelin ballroom to hear. "Look at this pathetic excuse for service," he sneered, gesturing dismissively at the young woman refilling his water glass. "I've seen better presentation in a roadside diner." What Preston didn't know was that this quiet waitress had been watching him all evening, taking careful notes of every cruel word and condescending gesture. What he couldn't have imagined was that in less than an hour, she would be standing on that very stage, holding the microphone that would change everything. The crowd's reaction when her true identity was revealed would echo through the resort for years to come. But first, she had to endure his relentless humiliation with nothing but a smile. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The Grandview Resort buzzed with the energy of 200 of the city's most influential people, all gathered for the annual Founders Gala. Outside, luxury cars lined the circular drive like gleaming monuments to success, their chrome bumpers reflecting the warm glow of the resort's elegant facade. Inside the main ballroom, servers moved between tables with practiced grace, their black uniforms a stark contrast to the sea of designer gowns and tailored suits that filled every corner of the opulent space. Jenna Rodriguez adjusted her apron for the third time that evening, her fingers trembling slightly as she surveyed the room from her position near the kitchen doors. At 28, she had worked in enough high-end establishments to know the unspoken rules of invisible service, where staff were expected to anticipate every need while remaining essentially unseen. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite the exhaustion that had been building for weeks, her brown eyes held a determined sparkle that seemed to brighten with each passing hour. The ballroom itself was a masterpiece of architectural grandeur, with soaring ceilings adorned with hand-painted murals depicting scenes of maritime adventure and exploration. Massive windows offered breathtaking views of the moonlit ocean beyond, where waves crashed against the rocky coastline in an endless rhythm that had lulled generations of visitors to sleep. Tonight, however, the focus was entirely on the celebration taking place within these walls, as the resort's board of directors prepared to announce significant changes to the establishment's ownership structure. Preston Blackwood sat at table 7, his imposing frame filling the leather chair as he surveyed the room with the air of a man who had never questioned his place at the top of the social hierarchy. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his custom-made tuxedo fit him like a second skin, but it was his voice that commanded attention wherever he went. At 52, he had built his fortune through a combination of shrewd investments, strategic partnerships, and an unwavering belief that success justified any means necessary to achieve it. "Excuse me, miss," Preston called out as Jenna approached his table with a tray of appetizers. His tone carried the casual authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I specifically requested the lobster canapés, not whatever this is supposed to be." Jenna glanced down at the tray, her training allowing her to maintain perfect composure despite the obvious mistake in his assumption. "Sir, these are the lobster canapés you requested. They're prepared with Maine lobster and garnished with microgreens, exactly as described on the menu." Preston's laugh was harsh and dismissive, cutting through the ambient conversation like a blade. "Do you really think I don't know quality when I see it? I've been dining at establishments that make this place look like a corner cafe since before you were born. This," he gestured dramatically at the carefully crafted appetizers, "is clearly imitation crab masquerading as lobster." The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Jenna felt the familiar burn of humiliation rising in her chest. She had worked with the chef personally to ensure these canapés met the highest standards, using ingredients that cost more per pound than most people spent on groceries in a week. Yet here she stood, being lectured by a man who had never spent a day in a commercial kitchen, never felt the sting of hot oil or the ache of standing on her feet for 12 hours straight. "I can assure you, sir, that these are genuine Maine lobster canapés," Jenna replied, her voice steady despite the tremor of anger building beneath her professional facade. Perhaps I could bring you something else from the menu if these don't meet your expectations. Preston's eyes narrowed as he studied her face, searching for any sign of defiance or disrespect that would justify the verbal assault he was clearly preparing to unleash. What I expect is competent service from people who actually know what they're doing. Looking at you, I can tell you've probably never seen real lobster outside of a grocery store freezer section. The words struck like physical blows, each syllable carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage to her dignity. Around them, other guests had begun to notice the confrontation, their conversations growing quieter as they strained to hear the drama unfolding at table 7. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact, while others seemed to relish the entertainment value of watching someone from the service class being put in their place. Jenna's mind raced as she processed the situation, weighing her options with the careful calculation of someone who had learned to navigate hostile environments through years of experience. She could defend herself more forcefully, but that would likely result in a scene that could jeopardize her position and the evening's events. She could retreat to the kitchen and send another server, but that would only validate his assessment of her incompetence. Instead, she chose the path that had served her well throughout her career, drawing on reserves of patience and professionalism that seemed bottomless. "I understand your concerns, sir," she said, her smile never wavering despite the fire building behind her eyes. "Would you prefer that I have the chef personally verify the ingredients and preparation method? He's available to speak with you directly if that would help resolve this matter." Preston's response was immediate and brutal. "What I would prefer is to not have my evening ruined by incompetent staff who clearly don't belong in an establishment of this caliber. Look at yourself. Honestly, your uniform is wrinkled, your presentation is sloppy, and you obviously have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to quality ingredients. How did you even get hired here?" The attack on her appearance was particularly cruel, given that Jenna had spent considerable time ensuring she looked professional and polished for the evening's important event. Her uniform was freshly pressed, her appearance immaculate, and her knowledge of food and service far exceeded what most people would expect from someone in her position. Yet Preston's words carried the weight of assumed authority, and she could see other guests beginning to scrutinize her with new eyes, as if his assessment had revealed flaws that had been invisible moments before. "Sir, I apologize if my service has disappointed you in any way," Jenna replied, her voice maintaining its professional warmth despite the growing storm of emotions churning beneath the surface. "I'm here to ensure that your evening is as enjoyable as possible, and I'm happy to address any concerns you might have about the food or service." Preston leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile playing across his lips as he realized he had an audience for his performance. "You know what your problem is? You people never understand your place. You think putting on a uniform and learning to carry a tray makes you equal to the people you're serving. But the truth is, some of us are born for greatness, and others are born to serve. It's not your fault, really. It's just the natural order of things." The philosophical cruelty of his words was perhaps worse than the personal insults, revealing a worldview that reduced human beings to their economic function and dismissed the possibility of dignity or worth beyond material success. Jenna felt a familiar rage building in her chest, the same fire that had driven her through years of education and professional development, the same determination that had pushed her to excel in every challenge she had ever faced. "I appreciate your perspective, sir," she said, her voice carrying just the slightest edge that suggested depths of strength beneath her composed exterior. "Is there anything else I can bring you this evening?" Preston's laugh was loud enough to draw attention from several nearby tables, where guests were now openly staring at the confrontation with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. "What you can bring me is a server who actually knows what they're doing. Someone who understands that when I order lobster, I expect lobster, not some cheap substitute that you're trying to pass off as the real thing. and frankly, someone who looks like they belong in a place like this. The comment about her appearance was the final straw, crossing a line that even the most patient person couldn't ignore. Jenna felt her composure crack slightly, not because the words hurt, but because they revealed such a profound lack of basic human decency that she struggled to comprehend how someone could reach middle age with such a twisted understanding of worth and value. "I'll speak with the manager about your concerns," she said, her smile never faltering but her eyes hardening with a resolve that suggested this conversation was far from over. "In the meantime, please enjoy the rest of your evening." As she turned to leave, Preston's voice followed her with one final insult. "And next time, maybe try to remember that some of us have standards. We can tell the difference between quality and whatever passes for acceptable in your world." The words echoed across the nearby tables, creating a ripple of uncomfortable silence that spread through the immediate area like a stone dropped in still water. Jenna continued walking toward the kitchen, her posture perfect and her pace unhurried, giving no indication that the verbal assault had affected her in any way. But inside, her mind was racing with thoughts and emotions that she couldn't fully process while maintaining her professional facade. In the kitchen, the atmosphere was electric with the controlled chaos of high-end catering, as chefs and servers moved with choreographed precision to ensure every dish met the establishment's exacting standards. The head chef, Marcus Chen, looked up from his station as Jenna entered, his experienced eyes immediately recognizing the signs of a difficult interaction with a guest. "Rough table?" he asked, his voice carrying the sympathy of someone who had witnessed countless similar scenes throughout his career in upscale hospitality. "Table 7, Jenna replied, her professional mask slipping slightly as she allowed herself a moment of honest frustration. "The gentleman seems to have strong opinions about the lobster canapés." Marcus's expression darkened as he processed her diplomatic description. "Those canapés are made with $40 per pound Maine lobster that arrived this morning. If he's complaining about the quality, he's either ignorant or looking for a reason to cause problems." "Probably both," Jenna muttered, then immediately regretted the unprofessional comment. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." "No, it wasn't," Marcus replied firmly. "Some people come to places like this specifically to make the staff feel small. It makes them feel bigger about themselves. The question is, how do you want to handle it?" Jenna considered the question carefully, knowing that her response would set the tone for the rest of the evening. She could ask Marcus to intervene, which would likely resolve the immediate problem, but might create new complications. She could request that another server take over table 7, which would protect her from further abuse, but might be seen as an admission of failure. Or she could continue serving Preston herself, maintaining her professionalism while quietly documenting his behavior for future reference. "I'll handle it," she said finally. Sometimes the best response to rudeness is simply to be better than the person who's being rude. Marcus nodded approvingly, recognizing the wisdom in her approach. "Just remember, you don't have to tolerate abuse. There's a difference between difficult customers and people who are just cruel for the sake of being cruel." As Jenna returned to the dining room, she noticed that the energy in the space had shifted slightly. The earlier buzz of conversation had given way to a more subdued atmosphere, with guests speaking in lower tones and casting occasional glances toward table 7. Preston, however, seemed oblivious to the change, continuing his conversation with his dinner companions as if nothing had happened. The next hour passed in a blur of professional service, with Jenna moving efficiently between tables while maintaining careful distance from Preston's immediate vicinity. She could feel his eyes on her periodically, as if he were waiting for another opportunity to demonstrate his superiority, but she gave him no opening for further conflict. Instead, she focused on providing exceptional service to every other table, earning grateful smiles and generous tips from guests who appreciated her attention to detail. As the evening progressed, the resort's general manager, David Park, took the microphone to address the assembled crowd. His voice carried easily through the ballroom's excellent acoustics, commanding attention from every corner of the room as he prepared to make the announcement that had been anticipated for months. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us tonight for what promises to be a historic evening for the Grandview Resort. As many of you know, our founder, Roberto Rodriguez, built this establishment with a vision of creating not just a luxury destination, but a place where memories are made and relationships are forged. Tonight, we celebrate not only his legacy but also the exciting changes that will ensure this resort continues to thrive for generations to come. The mention of Roberto Rodriguez's name sent a ripple of recognition through the crowd, though most guests were too focused on their own conversations to pay close attention to the historical context. Jenna, however, felt her heart rate increase as she recognized the direction the evening was heading, knowing that the moment she had been both anticipating and dreading was rapidly approaching. Over the past 6 months, we've been working closely with a new investor who shares our commitment to excellence and our vision for the future. This individual has not only provided the capital necessary for extensive renovations and improvements, but has also brought fresh ideas and perspectives that will help us remain competitive in an increasingly challenging market." End quote. Preston's voice cut through the manager's speech with typical disregard for social convention. "About time someone with real business sense got involved with this place. The service has been going downhill for years." His comment was directed at his table companions, but his voice carried far enough to reach several nearby tables, where guests shifted uncomfortably at the inappropriate interruption. Jenna felt a flush of anger at his continued rudeness, but she maintained her position near the kitchen doors, waiting for the moment when her presence would be required. "I'm particularly excited to announce that our new co-owner brings not only financial resources, but also a deep personal connection to the resort's history and mission. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming someone who has worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure this evening's success, and who represents the next generation of leadership for the Grandview Resort." The manager's words hung in the air as he scanned the crowd, his eyes eventually settling on a figure near the back of the room. "Miss Rodriguez, would you please join me on stage?" The announcement hit the room like a thunderclap, instantly silencing conversations and drawing every eye toward the back of the ballroom. Jenna felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes as she began walking toward the stage, her movements deliberate and confident despite the magnitude of the moment. She reached up to untie her apron, letting it fall away to reveal the elegant black dress she had worn beneath her server's uniform. Preston's face went through a series of transformations as he processed what he was witnessing. The initial confusion gave way to recognition, then to disbelief, and finally to a deep crimson flush that spread from his collar to his hairline. Around him, other guests began to murmur among themselves, pieces of the puzzle falling into place as they realized the implications of what they had just witnessed. As Jenna reached the stage, she paused to look out over the crowd, her eyes briefly meeting Preston's before moving on to survey the entire room. When she spoke, her voice carried easily through the space without the need for amplification, clear and strong with the authority of someone who had earned her position through years of hard work and dedication. "Thank you, David, and thank you all for being here tonight. I know many of you are surprised to see me up here, and I understand that might be confusing given the role I've been playing this evening, but I wanted to experience this event from every perspective, to understand how our guests are treated and how our staff performs under pressure." The explanation created a new wave of murmurs as guests began to understand the full scope of what had transpired. Some looked impressed by her unconventional approach, while others seemed uncomfortable with the deception, however well-intentioned. Preston, meanwhile, appeared to be struggling with the implications of his earlier behavior, his face cycling through expressions of embarrassment, anger, and something that might have been fear. "My father built this resort with the belief that every person who walked through these doors deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their position or purpose for being here. He taught me that true hospitality means creating an environment where everyone feels valued and welcomed, where the quality of service reflects not just technical skill, but genuine care for the human experience." End quote. Jenna's voice carried the weight of deep conviction, and her words resonated with many in the audience who had built their own success on similar principles. Others, however, shifted uncomfortably as they recognized themselves in the behaviors she was implicitly criticizing. Tonight, I had the opportunity to observe how that philosophy is being implemented in practice. I'm pleased to report that the vast majority of our C-Team guests embodied the spirit of kindness and respect that my father envisioned. They treated every member of our staff with courtesy and appreciation, understanding that we all play important roles in creating the exceptional experience that the Grandview Resort is known for. The positive assessment brought smiles to many faces as guests recognized themselves in her description and felt validated in their behavior. The atmosphere in the room began to shift toward warmth and appreciation, with people leaning forward to hear more of her observations. Unfortunately, I also witnessed behavior that fell far short of these standards. I saw how some individuals used their perceived status as an excuse to demean and belittle others, how they treated service staff not as fellow human beings but as targets for their own insecurities and frustrations. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as the implications of her words became clear. Preston's face had gone from red to pale, and he was gripping the edge of the table so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Around him, other guests were beginning to connect the dots, remembering the earlier confrontation and realizing the full scope of the evening's revelations. I want to be clear that such behavior has no place in my father's vision for this resort, and it will have no place in mine. We will continue to provide exceptional service to all of our guests, but we will also expect that our staff be treated with the respect and dignity they deserve. The applause that followed was tentative at first, but it quickly grew in volume and enthusiasm as guests realized the significance of the moment. Many were genuinely moved by her words and her approach, while others were simply relieved to be on the right side of her assessment. Preston, however, remained frozen in his chair, apparently unable to process the magnitude of his mistake. Going forward, the Grandview Resort will be implementing new policies and procedures designed to ensure that every interaction within these walls reflects our core values of respect, kindness, and excellence. We will be investing in additional training for our staff, upgrading our facilities and amenities, and creating new programs that will enhance the experience for everyone who chooses to spend time with us. The business-focused portion of her speech helped to redirect the conversation toward the future, allowing guests to focus on positive developments rather than dwelling on the uncomfortable revelations of the evening. Jenna's ability to pivot from personal reflection to professional vision demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of leadership that impressed even her harshest critics. But perhaps most importantly, we will be creating an environment where kindness is not just encouraged but expected, where the measure of a person's worth is not determined by their bank account or their social status, but by how they treat others, especially those who are in positions of service. The pointed nature of her comment was impossible to miss, and several guests found themselves examining their own behavior with new awareness. Preston, meanwhile, appeared to be sinking deeper into his chair, as if he could somehow disappear from the scene entirely. I know that some of you may have questions about my decision to work as a server this evening, and I understand that it might seem unusual or even deceptive. But I believe that true leadership requires understanding every aspect of the operation you're responsible for, and that includes experiencing the challenges and pressures that your team faces on a daily basis. Her explanation resonated with many business leaders in the audience, who recognized the wisdom in her approach even if they might not have the courage to implement it themselves. The concept of leadership through service was not new, but seeing it demonstrated so dramatically had a powerful impact on everyone present. What I learned tonight is that the character of an organization is not determined by its policies or procedures, but by the behavior of the people within it. Every interaction, every moment of kindness or cruelty, every choice to build someone up or tear them down, contributes to the overall culture and reputation of the institution. The philosophical depth of her observations elevated the conversation beyond the immediate drama, encouraging guests to think about the broader implications of their actions and choices. Even Preston, despite his obvious discomfort, seemed to be absorbing her words with growing understanding of their significance. As we move forward together, I want to make sure that everyone understands what we stand for and what we will not tolerate. The Grandview Resort will be a place where excellence is the standard, where every guest feels valued and respected, and where every member of our team is treated with dignity and appreciation. The clarity of her vision and the strength of her convictions were evident in every word, and the audience responded with growing enthusiasm and support. The earlier tension in the room had given way to something approaching inspiration, as people began to see the evening's events as part of a larger story about leadership, character, and the courage to do what is right. I want to thank all of you for your patience and understanding as we navigate this transition. I know that change can be challenging, and I appreciate your willingness to support us as we work to implement these new standards and expectations. Her gracious acknowledgement of the complexity of the situation helped to maintain the positive momentum she had been building throughout her speech. Rather than dwelling on the negative aspects of the evening, she was focusing on the opportunity for growth and improvement that lay ahead. In closing, I want to leave you with a simple message that I hope will guide all of our interactions, both here at the resort and in our lives beyond these walls. Always be kind. You never know who's watching, and you never know when your actions might have consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment. The final words of her speech hung in the air like a benediction, carrying a weight and significance that transcended the specific events of the evening. The message was simple but profound, challenging everyone present to examine their own behavior and consider the impact of their choices on others. The applause that followed was thunderous and sustained, with guests rising to their feet in a spontaneous standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Jenna stood at the podium, her composure perfect despite the emotional intensity of the moment, graciously acknowledging the response while maintaining the dignity and professionalism that had characterized her entire performance. As the applause finally died down, she stepped away from the microphone and made her way down from the stage, moving through the crowd with the same grace and confidence she had displayed throughout the evening. Guests approached her with congratulations and expressions of admiration, many eager to associate themselves with her vision and values. Preston, meanwhile, remained seated at his table, apparently paralyzed by the magnitude of his humiliation. The people around him were pointedly avoiding eye contact, unwilling to be associated with his earlier behavior now that its true implications had been revealed. The social isolation was perhaps more devastating than any public rebuke could have been, demonstrating the power of community standards and expectations. As the evening wound down and guests began to make their departure, many stopped to speak with Jenna, expressing their support for her leadership and their excitement about the resort's future. The conversations were warm and genuine, reflecting a shared understanding of the significance of what they had witnessed. I have to admit, I was skeptical when I heard about the ownership change. One guest confided to Jenna as they spoke near the ballroom's entrance. But after seeing your approach tonight, I'm convinced that this place is in excellent hands. Your father would be proud. The comment brought tears to Jenna's eyes, the first crack in her composed facade throughout the entire evening. Thank you, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. That means more to me than you could possibly know. Similar conversations took place throughout the room, as guests processed the evening's events and began to understand the deeper meaning behind what they had witnessed. The initial shock had given way to admiration and respect, with many expressing their intention to return to the resort and recommend it to others. Preston, however, remained conspicuously absent from these conversations, having apparently slipped out of the ballroom without speaking to anyone. His departure was noted by several guests, who exchanged knowing looks and meaningful glances that suggested the story of his behavior would follow him long after the evening's events were concluded. As the last guests departed, and the staff began the process of cleaning up, Jenna found herself alone in the ballroom, surrounded by the remnants of what had been perhaps the most significant evening of her professional life. The crystal chandelier still cast its dancing shadows across the marble floor, but the energy in the room had completely transformed from the tension and drama of earlier hours. Marcus Chen appeared at her side, having completed his kitchen duties and changed out of his chef's whites into casual blues. "So, how does it feel to be the official co-owner instead of just the secret boss?" he asked with a grin. "Terrifying," Jenna replied honestly, "but also liberating. I've been carrying this secret for months, watching everything from the sidelines while trying to figure out how to make the changes I knew were necessary. Tonight was my chance to really understand what we're dealing with." "And what did you learn?" Marcus asked, settling into one of the chairs that had been vacated by the departing guests. "That most people are fundamentally decent, but that the ones who aren't can do incredible damage if they're not held accountable. I learned that respect is earned through actions, not demanded through position. And I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be yourself, even when that's difficult or uncomfortable." The wisdom in her words reflected the maturity and insight that had driven her throughout her career. From her early days as a server working her way through business school, to her current position as owner of one of the region's most prestigious resorts, the journey had been long and challenging, but it had prepared her for exactly this moment. "What about Preston?" Marcus asked. "I heard he made quite a scene earlier." "Preston revealed exactly who he is," Jenna replied. "The question now is whether he learned anything from the experience, or whether he'll simply blame everyone else for his embarrassment." The philosophical approach to the evening's most difficult moment demonstrated her understanding that true leadership involves looking, quote, "beyond immediate gratification or revenge toward longer-term goals of growth and improvement." Preston's behavior had been inexcusable, but his potential for learning and change remained an open question. "I have to admit, I was worried about how you'd handle the confrontation," Marcus said. "When I saw you walking back to the kitchen after that first interaction, I could tell you were angry, but you never lost your professionalism. My father taught me that dignity is something you carry with you, not something that other people can give you or take away. Preston could insult me, demean me, try to make me feel small, but he couldn't actually diminish who I am or what I'm capable of. That knowledge gave me the strength to endure his behavior and wait for the right moment to respond." The lesson was one that had been hard-won through years of experience in challenging situations, but it had served her well throughout her career. The ability to maintain composure and perspective in the face of adversity was perhaps her greatest strength as a leader. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. "I assume there will be some changes around here." "Significant changes," Jenna confirmed. "Starting with a comprehensive review of our hiring practices, training programs, and guest policies. We're going to create clear standards for behavior and consequences for violations. But we're also going to invest in our staff, improve working conditions, and create opportunities for advancement and growth." The ambitious scope of her plans reflected her understanding that sustainable change requires systemic transformation rather than superficial adjustments. The evening's events had provided a catalyst for reform, but the real work would begin in the days and weeks that followed. "I want every person who works here to feel valued and respected, and I want every guest who visits to understand that they're part of something special. We're not just running a business, we're creating an environment where people can connect with each other and with the natural beauty of this place." The vision she articulated was both practical and aspirational. Grounded in sound business principles but elevated by a genuine desire to create positive experiences for everyone involved. It was the kind of leadership that inspired loyalty and commitment from both commis, employees, and customers. As they talked, the cleaning crew worked quietly around them, restoring the ballroom to its pristine condition for the next event. The efficiency and professionalism of their work was a testament to the quality of the resort staff, even at levels that were often invisible to guests. "You know," Marcus said, watching the crew work, "I think tonight might have been exactly what this place needed. Sometimes you have to shake things up to create the space for real change." "I hope so," Jenna replied. "But the real test will be whether we can maintain this momentum and translate tonight's drama into lasting improvements. Grand gestures are easy, but sustained excellence is much harder." The realistic assessment of the challenges ahead demonstrated her maturity as a leader and her understanding that dramatic moments must be followed by consistent execution if they are to have lasting impact. The evening's events had created an opportunity, but converting that opportunity into meaningful change would require sustained effort and commitment. As the conversation wound down and the ballroom was restored to its original splendor, Jenna felt a sense of completion that had been missing from her life for months. The secret she had carried, the role she had played, the confrontation she had endured, all of it had led to this moment of clarity and purpose. "I should probably get some rest," she said, standing and stretching muscles that had been tense throughout the evening. "Tomorrow is going to be a busy day." "I imagine it will be," Marcus agreed, "but I have a feeling you're ready for it." As they parted ways and Jenna made her way to her office to collect her things, she reflected on the evening's events and their significance. The confrontation with Preston had been unpleasant, but it had also provided a perfect illustration of the changes that needed to be made. His behavior had been a gift, in a way, because it had given her the opportunity to demonstrate her values and vision in a way that resonated with everyone present. The next morning brought a flood of phone calls, emails, and messages from people who had been at the gala and wanted to express their support for her leadership. The story of the evening's events had already begun to spread through social media and word of mouth, creating a buzz of excitement and anticipation around the resort's future. But perhaps the most significant message came from an unexpected source. Preston Blackwood's assistant called to request a private meeting, explaining that her employer wanted to apologize for his behavior and discuss how he might make amends for his actions. The request was surprising, but it suggested that the evening's events had indeed created an opportunity for growth and learning. When they met later that week, Preston was a different man from the arrogant bully who had dominated Table 7, was subdued, reflective, and genuinely remorseful about his behavior. The conversation was difficult for both of them, but it was also productive, resulting in a substantial donation to the resort's staff development fund and a commitment to model better behavior in the future. "I want you to know that I've been thinking about what you said," Preston told her as their meeting concluded, "about kindness and respect and treating people with dignity. I realized that I've been using my success as an excuse for behavior that I wouldn't tolerate from anyone else. That stops now." The transformation wasn't complete, of course, and there would be setbacks and challenges ahead. But the conversation demonstrated the power of confronting poor behavior with grace and strength, creating opportunities for learning and growth, rather than simply seeking revenge or punishment. As the weeks passed and the resort implemented its new policies and procedures, the changes became evident in every aspect of the operation. Staff morale improved dramatically, guest satisfaction scores reached new heights, and the resort's reputation for excellence and hospitality spread throughout the region and beyond. The evening that had begun with humiliation and cruelty had ultimately become a catalyst for positive transformation, proving that even the most difficult situations can create opportunities for growth and improvement. Jenna's decision to respond to Preston's behavior with dignity and strength had not only protected her own self-respect, but had also inspired others to examine their own actions and choices. The lesson was simple but profound. Always be kind, because you never know who's watching, and you never know when your actions might have consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment. In a world where power and status often seem to excuse poor behavior, the evening's events had demonstrated that true strength comes from treating others with respect and dignity, regardless of their position or circumstances. The story of that night would be told and retold for years to come, serving as a reminder that character is revealed not in moments of comfort and ease, but in times of challenge and conflict. Jenna had faced her moment of testing and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever to the values that had guided her throughout her life. 3 months after the gala, the transformation at the Grandview Resort was nothing short of remarkable. The staff moved with renewed confidence and pride, their interactions with guests reflecting the dignity and respect that had become the cornerstone of the establishment's culture. Jenna had implemented weekly training sessions focused not just on technical skills, but on the philosophy of service excellence, teaching every employee that their role was essential to the resort's success. The dining room buzzed with positive energy during the busy lunch service, as servers glided between tables with genuine smiles and authentic enthusiasm. Maria Santos, a longtime server who had witnessed the dramatic evening firsthand, found herself approaches by guests who specifically requested her section. Drawn by her warm personality and exceptional attention to detail, the confidence boost from the new management philosophy had transformed her from a nervous server into a hospitality professional who took genuine pride in her work. "I never thought I'd see the day when guests would shake my hand and thank me by name," Maria confided to Jenna during a break between services. "Yesterday, a couple from New York said they'd never experienced service like ours anywhere else. They're already planning their next visit." The ripple effects of that transformative evening extended far beyond the resort's walls. Local hospitality schools began reaching out to Jenna, requesting her as a guest speaker to share her insights on leadership and service excellence. The story of her undercover experience had become a case study in business ethics courses, sparking discussions about power dynamics, respect, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. Dr. Patricia Williams, a professor of hospitality management at the nearby university, invited Jenna to address her graduate students about the intersection of leadership and service. The lecture hall was packed beyond capacity, with students, faculty, and industry professionals eager to hear firsthand about the evening that had already become legendary in hospitality circles. "What I learned that night," Jenna told the attentive audience, "was that respect isn't something you can demand or purchase. It's something you earn through your actions, your consistency, and your willingness to treat others as you would want to be treated. The moment you start believing that your success gives you the right to diminish others, you've lost the very qualities that made that success possible in the first place." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom had experienced similar situations from various perspectives throughout their careers. The questions that followed were thoughtful and probing, reflecting a genuine desire to understand not just what had happened, but why it mattered for the future of the industry. Meanwhile, Preston Blackwood's journey of self-reflection had led him to make significant changes in his own life and business practices. The humiliation he had experienced at the gala had forced him to confront aspects of his personality and behavior that he had long ignored or justified. His business empire, built on aggressive tactics and a philosophy of winning at any cost, began to evolve toward more collaborative and respectful approaches. His first major initiative was the establishment of a scholarship fund for hospitality workers seeking to advance their education and careers. The fund, administered through a partnership with local colleges and universities, provided both financial support and mentorship opportunities for individuals looking to move into management roles within the industry. The irony wasn't lost on him that his greatest professional embarrassment had led to his most meaningful contribution to the field. "I spent decades believing that being tough meant being cruel," Preston reflected during a quiet conversation with his longtime business partner. "I thought that showing vulnerability or kindness was a sign of weakness that would undermine my authority. But watching Jenna that night, seeing how she handled my behavior with such grace and strength, I realized that true power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down." The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Years of ingrained habits and attitudes don't change overnight, and Preston found himself having to consciously correct his behavior and language in business meetings and social situations. His employees noticed the changes, initially with skepticism and eventually with appreciation, as they realized the improvements were genuine and sustainable. Back at the Grandview Resort, the success of Jenna's leadership philosophy was attracting attention from industry publications and management consultants. The resort's occupancy rates had increased by 30%, guest satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs, and staff turnover had dropped to nearly zero. The financial success was gratifying, but for Jenna, the real victory was in the daily interactions she witnessed between staff and guests. One particularly memorable afternoon, she observed a new server named David Rodriguez, no relation despite sharing her surname, struggling with a difficult table of guests who seemed determined to find fault with everything. Rather than becoming defensive or allowing the situation to escalate, David maintained his composure and professionalism, eventually winning over the challenging guests through patience and genuine care for their brand's experience. "I saw what you did with that table," Jenna told David after the guests had left, clearly satisfied with their meal and service. "That wasn't easy, but you handled it perfectly. How did you stay so calm?" David's response revealed the depth of cultural change that had taken place within the organization. "I remembered what you said about dignity being something we carry with us, not something others can give or take away. Those guests were frustrated about something that had nothing to do with me or the restaurant. My job was to help them have a better experience, not to take their frustration personally." The wisdom in his words, echoing the lessons from that transformative evening, demonstrated that the values Jenna had championed were becoming embedded in the resort's DNA. New employees were learning these principles from day one, while longtime staff members were finding renewed purpose and pride in their work. The success story began attracting visitors who came specifically to experience the resort's legendary service culture. Travel bloggers and hospitality industry professionals made pilgrimages to the Grandview, eager to witness firsthand the environment that had emerged from that dramatic evening. The resort became a destination not just for relaxation and luxury, but for inspiration and learning. Among these visitors was Rebecca Chen, a hotel chain executive who had heard about the resort's transformation through industry networks. She spent 3 days at the property, observing operations and interviewing staff members about their experiences. Her final report would influence service standards across her company's entire portfolio of properties. "What strikes me most," Rebecca told Jenna during their final meeting, "is how authentic everything feels. You can't fake the kind of enthusiasm and pride I see in your staff. It's clear that they're not just following procedures, they're living values that they genuinely believe in." The observation captured something essential about the resort's evolution. The changes weren't superficial or cosmetic. They were fundamental shifts in how people thought about their work and their relationships with each other. The culture of respect and dignity had become self-reinforcing, with each positive interaction strengthening the overall environment. As autumn arrived and the resort prepared for its traditional holiday season, Jenna found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. The decision to work undercover as a server had been risky, potentially exposing her to criticism and second-guessing from board members and investors. But the insights she had gained, both about the operation and about herself, had proven invaluable in shaping the resort's future direction. The holiday gala that year was a completely different experience from the transformative evening 9 months earlier. The same ballroom, the same crystal chandelier, the same marble floors, but the energy was entirely transformed. Guests interacted with staff members as valued partners in creating a memorable experience, rather than as invisible servants existing solely for their convenience. Preston Blackwood was among the guests that evening, having been invited back by Jenna as a gesture of forgiveness and an opportunity to demonstrate how much both he and the resort had changed. His behavior was markedly different from his previous visit, marked by genuine courtesy and appreciation for the staff's efforts. When he thanked his server for excellent service, the words carried weight and sincerity that would have been impossible to imagine during his earlier visit. "I want you to know," he told Jenna during a quiet moment between courses, "that evening changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. I spent the last 9 months examining every aspect of how I treat people, and I have a lot of work still to do. But I'm grateful for the lesson, even though it was painful to receive." The conversation represented a full-circle moment that neither of them could have anticipated during their initial confrontation. The man who had once dismissed her as beneath his notice was now seeking her guidance and expressing genuine gratitude for the harsh but necessary lesson she had taught him. The success of the resort's transformation had also attracted the attention of Roberto Rodriguez's former business partners, who had initially been skeptical of his daughter's unconventional approach to leadership. Their doubts had been replaced by admiration and respect as they witnessed the results of her vision and commitment. "Your father always said that true hospitality comes from the heart," longtime family friend and business associate Antonio Vasquez told Jenna during a visit to review the resort's financial performance. "I think he would be amazed to see how you've not only preserved his legacy, but expanded it into something even more meaningful." The financial numbers told their own story of success. Revenue had increased by 40%, profit margins had improved dramatically, and the resort's reputation had never been stronger. But beyond the quantitative measures, there were qualitative changes that couldn't be captured in spreadsheets or quarterly reports. The local community had also benefited from the resort's transformation. Jenna had instituted partnerships with area schools, offering internships and job training programs that provided pathways for young people to enter the hospitality industry. The resort's commitment to sourcing locally had boosted regional agriculture and small businesses, creating a network of mutually beneficial relationships that strengthened the entire area. High school students from the local district now visited the resort regularly for career exploration programs, learning about the various opportunities available in hospitality management. Many of these young people had never considered the industry as a viable career path, but seeing the respect and professionalism that characterized the resort's culture opened their eyes to new possibilities. "I used to think working in a restaurant or hotel was just a temporary job," 17-year-old Ashley Martinez told Jenna during a career fair presentation. "But seeing how you've created something special here, I'm thinking about studying hospitality management in college. You've shown me that this can be a real career, not just a stepping stone." These conversations with young people were among the most rewarding aspects of Jenna's role as a leader. She understood that the industry's future depended on attracting talented, motivated individuals who could carry forward the values and standards that had been established. By demonstrating that hospitality work could be both financially rewarding and personally fulfilling, she was helping to reshape perceptions and create opportunities for the next generation. The transformation at the Grandview Resort had also influenced other businesses in the area. Local restaurants, shops, and service providers had begun adopting similar approaches to customer service and employee treatment, recognizing that the principles Jenna had championed were applicable across industries and business models. The ripple effects extended into the broader business community as well. Other hospitality companies began sending executives to study the resort's practices, hoping to replicate its success in their own operations. Management consultants started incorporating elements of the Grandview model, into their recommendations for client companies struggling with employee engagement and customer satisfaction issues. As the first anniversary of the transformative gala approached, Jenna found herself invited to speak at industry conferences and leadership seminars around the country. Her message was always the same, that success in business, as in life, ultimately depends on how we treat other people, especially those who may seem to have less power or influence than we do. The speaking engagements were professionally rewarding, but they also served a larger purpose in spreading the principles and practices that had proven so successful at the resort. Each presentation was an opportunity to challenge business leaders to examine their own behavior and consider how they might create more positive, respectful work environments. The question isn't whether you can afford to treat people well, Jenna would tell her audiences. The question is whether you can afford not to. In today's economy, where talented employees have choices and customers have endless options, creating a culture of respect and dignity isn't just morally right, competitively essential. The message resonated with audiences across different industries and sectors, leading to consulting opportunities and advisory roles that allowed Jenna to influence business practices far beyond the hospitality industry. Her expertise in organizational culture and leadership development became highly sought after, but she remained committed to maintaining her primary focus on the resort that had provided the foundation for her success. As she prepared for the anniversary gala, Jenna reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The decision to work undercover as a server had been born from a desire to understand her business from every angle, but it had evolved into something much more profound. The experience had taught her lessons about leadership, character, and human nature that no business school or management book could have provided. The upcoming anniversary event would be an opportunity to celebrate not just the resort's transformation, but the broader movement toward more respectful and dignified business practices that had emerged from that original evening. Representatives from dozens of companies that had adopted similar approaches would be in attendance, along with industry leaders, academics, and journalists who had been following the story. But perhaps most importantly, the event would honor the staff members who had embraced the resort's values and made the transformation possible. Their dedication, professionalism, and commitment to excellence had been the foundation of everything that had been accomplished. Without their buy-in and enthusiasm, even the most well-intentioned policies and procedures would have fallen flat. The anniversary gala would also serve as a platform for announcing the next phase of the resort's evolution. Jenna had been working with her team to develop new initiatives that would further strengthen the property's reputation for excellence while expanding its positive impact on the community and industry. And in the end, that was perhaps the most important lesson of all. That true leadership is not about dominating others or asserting superiority, but about creating environments where everyone can thrive, succeed. The Grandview Resort had found its new direction, and the future looked brighter than ever before. The story that had begun with cruelty and humiliation had evolved into something beautiful and inspiring, proving that even in the darkest moments, there exists the potential for transformation, growth, and redemption.